My dad was probably the most influential person that I had in my life. And he wasn't only my father, he was my best friend. My father got me started in athletics as just a little boy playing catch with me. I loved it. I mean, I loved the activity, I loved the physicalness of it, and being a part of a group, being a part of a team. And I give especially football and wrestling the credit for saving my life in Vietnam and saving the lives of many others too. The mental discipline that I learned from those two sports, the ability to focus in the middle of chaos, in the middle of a crossfire where the enemy is firing at me from one direction and the American soldiers are firing from the other direction. One of the things about the medic in Vietnam is it was the first war in which the medics actually also carried a weapon. I had an M16 issued to me. I saw a lot of things that other soldiers didn't see. When they called for a medic, I was the only one often that went to the scene of the accident. I called it, though, a positive job in a negative situation because I could save lives while lives were being taken.
In the spring of 1969, just a few months after arriving in Vietnam, Private First Class McCloughan and his company were given orders to occupy New Yun Hill.
And our company commander said, "You haven't sent any forward observers in there. So number one, we don't know how many people are in there. Number two, we don't know what kind of weapons they have. So I think this is a flawed mission."
Despite the company commander's reservations, the mission was ordered to move forward.
The next morning, about 7 o'clock, helicopters start coming in. It was pretty good to have 135 at the most on a company. We had been in some skirmishes. We were down to 89 men. We got there, and it was what they call a hot LZ. Hot LZ is when you're being fired upon. Helicopters will not land at a hot LZ. We were told to jump out. I noticed there was a guy lagging behind. He was probably 75 to 100 yards away with a squad of NVA behind him shooting at him. So I jumped up without hesitation, ran out swerving, slid in next to him with a second base slide in.
The soldier had injured his knee jumping from the helicopter earlier. McCloughan threw the man across his shoulders and carried him to safety through enemy fire. That evening, a platoon was ordered to search and clear the area.
And I'm thinking, are they nuts? There's lots of people, I think, out there because we got 2 helicopters shot down coming in here. But we lined up. They had a lead squad going out, and I placed myself, along with Hatton and Mittendorf, 2 machine gunners, right behind that squad. They ran into an ambush. Just all kinds of firepower going on. About that time, I looked up over this berm out of the trench line up towards New Yun Hill, and it was probably a mile away itself. And it looked like little ants or lava coming down off that hill, and I thought, there's a lot of people up there. I hear a call for a medic up over the top of this berm. So I looked up over there, and I thought I saw 2 men over in a bush. I jumped up, got as low as I could, headed towards those bushes, and 2 of the men from the first squad had made their way without their weapons into these bushes. About that time, a rocket-propelled grenade came in and hit behind me. I don't know how close behind me, but it pelted me from head to foot, and it stung really bad. But I didn't pay too much attention to it because I was focused on these 2 guys. And I went over, and I couldn't see any wounds on them or anything, but they wouldn't move. They were frozen in place. And I dragged those 2 men. You'd be surprised how strong you can get when you get scared. And anybody says they're not scared. I'm still focused, but I know that I'm in a dangerous situation. I dragged them across that berm and into that trench line. I heard combat medic, and so I went out probably 4 or 5 more times. We finally got a medevac in, and we're putting people on the medevac. And the lieutenant, company commander, says, "Get on, Doc. Well, then I remembered I'd gotten hit by a rocket-propelled grenade, and I looked down and saw my blood all over me. I said, well, I'm not going. And he looked at me with puzzled. He said, why not? You're going to need me. That's all I said. I thought by telling him that I wasn't getting on, that I spent my last day on earth. But I'd rather be dead in a rice paddy than alive in a hospital and find out that one of my men, one of my brothers, was killed because I wasn't there.
At sunrise, the battle paused, but resumed again that evening. Like the night before, McCloughan was repeatedly called to tend to wounded soldiers and carry them through the crossfire to relative safety. The company was down to just 32 men and running short on ammunition. At one point amid the chaos, McCloughan made a bargain.
All of a sudden, a thought came out of nowhere. It had been since I was a small boy that I told my father that I loved him. You didn't do that. You didn't tell your brothers you loved them. Dads didn't tell sons, and sons didn't tell dad. And I had a conversation with the Lord. And I said, Lord, if you get me out of this hell on earth so I can look my father straight in the eye just one more time and tell him that I love him, I'll be the best dad, I'll be the best coach, and I'll be the best teacher that I could possibly be. And an incredible peace came over me. It was no longer in my ballpark. Went back out front, started fighting some more. That's the thing about the medic. You're not only a medic, you're a grunt. All of a sudden, the captain says, hey, they're going to try to get a resupply into us because we're getting low. I mean, we've been fighting for 2 days. Somebody get out there with this probe light. And I'm thinking, well, somebody's going to jump up and go out there. Nobody did. So I got the strobe light, crawled out on my belly. I'm holding this, and I put it in a helmet, and these streaks go over the top of me. I look like a fireball go over the top of me. Pay much attention to it, but I said, boy, if those things get any lower, I'm history. They couldn't get the resupply helicopter in. I had to make my way back then to the unit without getting hit. The next morning, got everybody on the helicopter, and we had a lot of cleanup work to do there to get them on, and I was putting people in body bags. And I started back towards where Hatton was standing. It's the last I remember. I woke up in an aid station. They had an IV in me. Going 2 days without anything to eat or drink. I had dehydrated. Probably the most devastating thing about that battle was the fact that we went in with 89 men, and later on, we found out there were 2,000 NVA and 700 VC on that hill. Well, if you remember, I asked the Lord if he'd get me out of that situation and get me back to where I could become a teacher and a coach and a dad. So I was really excited about coming home and getting into the classroom. And I ran to my father in the O'Hare Airport, and I threw my arms around him and I told him that I loved him. And he said those 3 words back to me as if we'd been doing that regularly for 24 years of my life so far. And that was our greeting and our departure from that point on. I taught my children and my grandchildren and my athletes and even guys that I coached with it. Hey, you know what? Those 3 words are valuable. It's okay to say those. It's as macho as it can get.
In 2016, 47 years after the battle on New Yun Hill, McCloughan received a voicemail.
Our defense secretary, Ash Carter, just contacted me that he's going to recommend your heroic services in the war for the Medal of Honor.
Well, I'm going to tell you what my honest opinion is of this medal that's around my neck. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to 89 men. 89 men that went in against a very powerful enemy who had more weaponry than we had. It belongs to them as much as it belongs to me. There's a lot of people who did some very brave things, as brave as probably anything I did, and nobody saw them do it. I wear this for them too. I held 18, 19, and 20-year-old boys in my arms. I heard their last words, and I watched the last breath of air come out of them. And I can tell you that the freedom that you and the rest of the Americans enjoy day in and day out has been paid for in full. Had I never gone to Vietnam, I would have never met some of the kindest, most compassionate, loving, courageous men that I've ever met in my life. I would have been cheated out of meeting those brothers who continue to be my brothers to this day. Boy, that guy needed a shave. What a pleasure to be here with my wife, Cherie, and we'd like to thank a few people. First of all, Tanya Quintana, I hope I'm saying that right. Joan Anello, am I saying that right? Of course, Henry Jones has been taking us all over the place, and we're still safe. Karen Sparky Turner, I see why they call her Sparky, you don't have to tell me. And of course, Drew, with just an idea in your head, what a marvelous, marvelous thing this has turned out to be. You should be very satisfied. I know you'll still work and make it better and better day in and day out. You don't get. And my wife, Cherie, she's also my calendar girl. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for her, so thank her for me being here today. And she's actually more important than me. I don't know if you know it or not, but she's married to a Medal of Honor recipient. Yeah. But I want to tell Patricia, and I figured this out. I'm not real good at math, but this wasn't that hard, okay? You're rarer than Drew and I are, because there are fewer wives of living Medal of Honor recipients than there are living Medal of Honor recipients. And I'd never thought about that before. And we know, Drew and I know, that it's just not he and I that make things in this society go. It's you. I like to start with a story. Those of you that, if you were at my induction into Hall of Heroes, raise your hand. Come on, honey, you were there. Well, I told this, so I just want to make sure because you'd have to hear it again, because I told this at my induction. How many know what a Dear John letter is? Raise your hand. Dear John letter. For those that don't, it's a letter from a significant other, a girlfriend, a fiancé, wife, saying what Maria said to John Smith. He got this Dear John letter. Of course, his name's John. Got a Dear John letter from Maria, and it said, Dear John, I don't love you anymore. I can't wait for you. It's going to be way too long. So I'm dating a guy that you know, and I hope you don't get too angry, but I'd like to have that picture back. So he's sitting there sulking, and this drill sergeant comes in, and he asks him what's wrong. You can see he's distraught, and he tells him the story, and he said, well, have you got that picture? And he said, yeah. So he gave it to him and went back to sulking. Very intelligent drill sergeant went on around to the rest of the men and asked them if they had a picture of their significant other, and many of them did. He got the pictures from them and sat down and wrote this letter that Maria thinks is coming from John, and sent it to her with pictures, and it went like this: Dear Maria, I'm really sad that you don't love me anymore, because I still love you. I wanted you to wait for me. And I'm really angry that you might be dating somebody that I know. But I do understand why you might want your picture back. So would you take yours and send the rest of them back? Because I can't remember which one you are. I wished I would have known that story in Vietnam, because there was a few guys that got those letters. I understand that the wrestling team is here, and you heard a little bit about wrestling, but I'm going to tell you a story about how I got into wrestling that you may not believe. I'd just gotten done with my freshman football season at Olivet College, and we didn't have a JV schedule in our league, the MIAA. So we played Jackson State Prison twice, Ionia State Prison twice, and the boys' training school twice. So that was my first glimpse of Vietnam right there, inside of a prison with all of these inmates surrounding us. I mean, if there was a riot, I would have never had to go to Vietnam, I can tell you that much. But they were recruiting. They were recruiting for a new wrestling team at Olivet College, and I had never seen a high school or college wrestling match, but they were consistent. They came back 4 times. I said, look, I was a all-conference basketball player in high school, a point guard, averaged 18 points a game. Were you going out for basketball? No, look at how tall I am. I'll never make the team here. Well, come on, come out for wrestling. So I finally agreed to go out. I found out later the reason they kept coming back to me was that they had been in to bother the president so much that he said, if you could get one more guy to go out, I'll back the program. And you're looking at him. So I walked in to the wrestling room the first day, and I looked around. I said, hey, where's the ropes? I've seen this on TV, and there's supposed to be ropes. So all of that time, I thought they were recruiting me for big-time wrestling because I had never seen a high school match before. Luckily, I fell in love with it, and as you heard, it was lucky that I did, because it really did teach me to be ready for what I never knew that I was going to face. Let me tell you guys that are out for wrestling, it doesn't make you any better than anybody else, but it does make you privileged to be able to use whatever you learn on those wrestling mats later in your life. The 2 young men next to me on the picture are my 2 sons, by the way. My oldest son is a state policeman, a lieutenant detective, 29 years in the state police in Michigan. And my younger brother, not brother, but my younger son, he's a drug dealer. He's in the he's in the shipping department of a pharmaceutical business. So don't get excited. Don't call on him or anything like that. But he said to me one day, Dad, you wouldn't believe how many painkillers we send out of there every day. But both of them turned into fine young men, and I'm a lucky dad. But guys there on the wrestling team, I used a lot of fireman's carry in Vietnam. And as I said before, it allowed me to save a lot of lives. You know, there was a song that came out in the early 1970s. How many people were around in the 1970s? Raise your hand. Let me see if you remember this. The song's title was, Short People Have No Reason to Live. Do you remember that song? Short people have no reason to live. So I drew that to the attention of those at the Hall of Heroes, and Mattis almost fell off his seat when I said that. This sure beats the hell out of that, doesn't it? Short people do have reason to live, because I was able to be low to the ground without really getting down too much. A couple of things that I noticed when I researched the Center for American Values was your mission statement: to honor the extreme sacrifice made to help sustain our American values, and to ensure these extraordinary actions are preserved forever. You know, man's never dead till his name is no longer spoken. This facility will keep the men on these walls right here, will keep them alive forever. Another thing that I noticed was your code of the West. Live each day with courage. Take pride in your work. My father and mother taught my brothers and I what work was all about. As you heard, my dad pretty much put that house together year by year, nail by nail, dug the basement out by hand with a wheelbarrow and a shovel. And it wasn't until I thought everybody lived like that, by the way. I always say we weren't poor, we just didn't have any money, okay? We were very rich in other things. And my dad worked 43 years in a piano factory, and my mom 35 years making pistons back when the auto industry was streaming there in Michigan. And watching them made me realize that, you know, unless there's a little sweat and things that you do, you don't appreciate it as much. I was telling Drew that my dad got up at 6 o'clock to be at work at 7 in South Haven at that piano factory. And so by the time I was in junior high, I started putting things together. And I said, hey, Dad, why do you get up at 6, leave at 6 o'clock to be there at 7? It only takes 10 minutes. He said, in case I get a flat tire, I'll be there on time. 43 years, my dad had one flat tire. And he arrived at work on time. So my brothers and I were lucky that we were not poor, just didn't have much money. You know, I've been a lot of places since, Cherie and I have been a lot of places, but I can tell you one thing. I am glad I'm here today. I would be no place else for any other reason than to be here. This is where Cherie and I actually had our first convention in Pueblo. I had just gotten the Medal of Honor, and so it was right here that it became home to us. And you treated us so well, not knowing anything about where we were and what was going to happen in our lifetime, but we feel as if we're at home when we come here. And this summer, you and your staff made us feel, everyone feel at home. That's what it's all about. I want to get something, I want to read something, although you heard a little bit of this here, but I would like you to get the picture of what it was like in that 48-hour battle. So this medal around my neck is about love. It's about a love so deep that it's really hard to measure. It's about a group of individuals. Some of us were drafted, and some were, of course, volunteers, and some were still boys. And we volunteered to serve our country. We came from every part of this great nation, took our basic and individual training, advanced individual training, and we ended up family in a place far different from the hometowns that we grew up in. We started out loyal to our country and myself to the United States Army, but we soon discovered that getting as many of us out of there alive as possible would be our main goal. We became fast friends and soon brothers, and then blood brothers, kind of closer than those brothers that we had back home. Each of us had a part in the survival we were thrown into, and we took our jobs very seriously. And of course, as a medic, they knew I would do anything. They called my name, I would come running, and they would do the same for me. A couple of really good machine gunners, Hatton and Mittendorf, they could put a M60 machine gun bullet past my left and right ear about 6 inches and pick off an enemy soldier behind him. I had what I called a positive job, as it was mentioned on the film, in a negative situation, because I was trained to save lives and to make those that were sick and diseased better. And my dad instructed me, of course, to never do anything halfway. If I'd have gone in on a helicopter that first night, he said, you don't quit until the job's over. And I was very much aware that the job wasn't over. And I was also aware that our company commander was right once we got there. There were 2,000 NVA and 700 VC on that hill. against 89 of us. So we stuck together. We fought with our backs to the wall, and we were able to get, if that's for me, I tell them I'm not here, okay. And so we did get out of a position where we were outnumbered 30-1. I would never play, I'd never wrestle fellas against 30 other guys, but in this particular case, there was no getting out unless we fought our way out. Greater love has no man or woman but that to lie down their life for another person. And that's exactly what happened May 13th through the 15th, 1969, when Charlie Company, the men of Charlie Company, were willing to risk their lives to save my life and the life of those around us. I worked on anywhere from 40 to 50, had nothing to eat or drink for the 48 hours. I used my water on all of my injured personnel. And I had done it before, though wrestlers know. I'd gone 48 hours without eating to make weight in college, but I would not advise that, but we did it. And we held our own. The love we had for each other conquered the enemy. They moved out. We were still there. I got something that I want to get off of my chest here, too. That is that we didn't lose the Vietnam War. Any Vietnam veterans here? Okay. Whether you're a Vietnam veteran or not, you need to know this, and this is part of my mission. I want you to know who the Vietnam veterans were, not who's people that weren't there thought they were. If you will read any of the research that's done by a man who's dead now, and his name was Professor Douglas Pike. He's been quoted by General Westmoreland many times, and quote by Pike. We did not lose a battle of any consequence. It was almost an unprecedented performance by our fighting men. The war was a major defeat for the NVA and the VC. To those of you that fought in the Vietnam War, thanks for your service. Welcome home. You stopped communism from being spread all the way from Singapore through those little countries down to the Philippines. The communists didn't want to go into those countries because they knew if they did, they'd have to face the American fighting man. And we didn't back off for anything. I'm sorry it's taken 50 years to recognize what you really did. But during the Vietnam War, 9.7 million were in the service, and I believe it was 2.5 million right in that area that were deployed. But I bet you don't know this stat. There are over 14 million, as of last count, who say they went to Vietnam and they were never in the service, some of them. And they certainly never went to Vietnam. Might make anybody that fought in the Vietnam War angry, but I'm here to calm you down and tell you why they want to be, why would they want to be, one of the bad guys? That's who we were in a lot of the protest and films and things. Well, I'll tell you why they want to be used, because you were ABA. You were an American badass, and that's what they wanted to be. But they didn't want to, put in the time to be that person. Here's some of the reasons. I'll refer to it as ABA from now on. Here's some of the reasons that you are an ABA. When it was your turn to serve, you didn't run or hide. You joined or you were drafted, and you took your place amongst those who chose to fight. No matter what war or when you were in, as a veteran, you raised your hand. You repeated the military oath and confirmed a commitment to America and its ideals. You signed your family's name on a piece of paper that said they could send you anywhere they wanted to, even in harm's way. When people say to me, and I'm sure they said it to all of the veterans out there, I was in the service, but I didn't do what you did. Well, they sign their name on that line. You don't jump on a grenade thinking it's not going off. You jump on it thinking it is going off. You want to save the people around you. They jumped on a grenade. They signed on the line. If they didn't get chosen to go, lucky, and I'm glad they didn't. You worked your hind end off training so that you could do your job, whatever it was. You became a member of the biggest team that you will ever be a part of, no matter what your job was or what branch of the service. You fought for a group of human beings who could not defend themselves. You were a part of the toughest military force in the world, and may I add, the most compassionate. We go to countries where they just can't defend themselves from the power of those who are attacking them. We're seeing it around us every day now. Between fights, you try to write a letter home, and you sure didn't want to say what was really going on, but just wanted to stay in contact with your friends and family back home. You saw, I don't know if you know this or not, but the Vietnam veteran, I'm speaking just to the Vietnam veteran right now. The Vietnam veteran saw more combat direct contact with the enemy than their father who fought in World War II. The World War II veterans in 4 years averaged 40-day direct contact with the enemy. The Vietnam veteran in 1 year had 240 days average contact with the enemy because the helicopter could get us to the fight right away. In World War II, they had to march to a lot of the places. But think about that. In 1 year, average, 240 days contact. You saw those, no matter what war you were in, you saw those that were close to you and you grew to love deeply lose their lives. Or to say it another way, some of them lost part of their life because they came home with body parts that they did not come home with body parts that they went over there with. And might I say that most veterans that I know that were in the thick of it, they really weren't there for any medals or ribbons on their chest. They just wanted to get home and be back in the hometown again with their families and their friends. You saw, if you're a veteran and experienced, things that you had never seen and will never see again. Things you cannot talk about because no one would believe you if you told them anyway. You didn't care about the medals and those awards on your chest. You took a test, though, the hardest test that you'll ever take, and you passed it. As a coach and a teacher, I know what I'm talking about here. You played in a game, if we could call it that was tougher than any game I've ever played in, and we won. Let's hope that our children and our grandchildren don't have to face some of the things we faced as veterans. You came home, you started a career, you raised a family, you built a house. And you tried to ignore what some people were saying about you and your war. They're saying about every war after our war, the war on terror. You know, they're saying the same things. But they don't know what you really experienced. They never will. They haven't walked in your boots. And so we must reserve ourselves to the fact that they're not aware of the things that we faced. No, you can't really blame the wannabes for wannabeing you. They want to be a hero, but just like a little kid that looks up to one of those athletes or a movie star or something, they didn't want to put in the time or risk their life to become an ABA. Each and every veteran you're a member of a group called the Vets. And I'll tell you, I'm very proud to be a part of that particular group. 98%, I've heard 97 and 98% of the Vietnam veterans were honorably discharged. So all of those things that they were saying about those guys, I guess that wasn't true. And veterans across this great nation, they've continued to use that character to serve their family, their church, their community, their state, their country, and now the world. Those on that memorial wall, though, whichever wall you want to go and see, and there's a bunch of them, they're the real heroes. As you heard, I held 18, 19, and 20-year-old boys, some of them, in my arms. And to hear someone's last words and watch that last breath of life come out of their bodies, I can tell you that our freedom here in this room has been paid for in full. And I think President Reagan said it best. They gave up 2 lives, the one they were leading when they were killed, the one they never got to lead. Never got to never got to meet their soulmate and marry, watch the birth of a child, watch that child grow, maybe coach that child like I got to coach my 2 boys and another 4,000 boys. They never got to walk their little girl down the aisle and dance that father-daughter dance at the end of the ceremony. And every holiday, anniversary, birthday, or any kind of family or reuniting of your classmates, they're not there. They gave up 2 lives so you and I can lead the one life that we lead today. Last thing I'm going to talk about is the disrespect that's given to that flag that's off to my right here. I know that people protest, but they have no reason to protest for anything using the American flag. Those that gave their life, they come home with that flag draping their casket. I know some people can't understand that, again, because they haven't been there. But I want to point out to you that there are thousands of people in a football stand standing with their hand over their heart or saluting. It's funny how just a few people, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, get all of the attention. We know the value of that. And I'm going to tell you one last thing. These veterans in this room, in your families, everybody probably in this room is touched by a veteran who served. You're in every wave and every wrinkle of that flag. As the wind whips it across the sky, you have given it wings to fly. You are the epitome of an ABA. And I'm proud to be called your brother in arms. I have assignment to go along with my story about my dad. By the way, that's the biggest lesson that I learned in Vietnam, that you should say those 3 words. Now, I know you haven't done this on purpose, but I'm sure there's somebody that you've ignored telling those 3 words to lately. You've just been kind of busy, okay? So your assignment today, you didn't think you'd get out here with a teacher not giving you an assignment, did you? Huh? Your assignment today is to, whatever way you can, if you can see them personally, do it that way, but you got your phone and it can do all kinds of things. But don't only tell them that you love them, tell them why you love them. I love you all, whether I know you or not, because I joined a bunch of heroes. I love the story. A little girl says, "Grandpa, are you a hero?" And he said, "No, honey, but I served with a lot of them. Thank you." Thank you very much, and I'll be ready for questions and answers now.
So I have the mic, and I'll bring it to you if you have any questions. But I'd like to start with one.
Okay?
You made the deal with the Lord
Mhm.
that if you get me out of here, I'm going
Uh-huh.
to tell my father I love him.
Mhm.
What was the plane ride home? What was the journey home like?
The journey home on the plane was pretty quiet for me. I was kind of in a daze for several months, actually. First of all, I didn't believe I was home. You know, I knew I was there physically, but you just don't transition overnight coming from what I had seen. And so I was just kind of in a daze. But I did think about the fact that, by the way, did you come home on a plane or on a boat? That plane, tell me if I'm wrong, there wasn't a sound on that plane till we got far enough into the air that we knew the enemy couldn't shoot at us anymore. It was completely dead quiet on that plane. And then once we got to that altitude, it just erupted. Yeah, yeah. Good question. Come on, kids. You don't want to fail this class.
How about the wrestlers?
Oh,
there
here-
we go.
Okay. Oh, he's got it written down. Watch out.
At your Medal of Honor ceremony at the White House, you had several men with you that you had served with and even men that you had saved. Had you maintained a relationship with them over the years?
After I got done coaching, first of all, remember, I had a promise I had to keep. So that's why I was over-involved in coaching. But I loved what I did. So when I got done coaching and retired, I had a little time on my hand. So Sri will attest to this. I stayed downstairs many a night, and I have, out of the 32 of us that walked out of that battle, I have reconnected 23. One of them, it took me 89 phone calls before I found him. And when I did find these guys, I'd say, "This is Jim McCloughan." "Who?" I said, "Jim McCloughan." "Who?" I said, "This is Doc." "Doc, that's you?" So we had these nicknames, and I'll tell you, there was a guy from Texas, and you cannot find Tex in the phone book. So I had to search around and get their names and where they might be. The one with the 89 phone calls, that was Sergeant Hatton. He talked real slow. And I thought he was from the South. I was looking all over the South, and I finally found him in the state of Washington, where he grew up. So there was little things like that, but I was busy trying to find them, and 23 men, including Tex. Joan, what did you want to ask? Yes, I'm one of you. Yeah.
You're not short. You are tall. I have to look up at you as my hero. Thank you for your service, and God bless you and your family.
Oh, I love you. Oh, I got my sign it done.
Thank you,
Thank
Joan.
you. I was so short as a kid, I had to reach up to pull my socks down. I did chin-ups on a curb.
Jim, with the news reports just over the last few days, what would you say to our young people that are in uniform right now?
Be safe. Know that you're supported by more people than you can imagine. Stay the pace, stay the path, do the mission. We don't know what the outcome will be, but if you give your best, like my dad said, don't do it halfway. Do it to the best of your ability and do it until that job is finished. The Bible tells us that we'll probably always have wars, so I don't think that. If you know, in every religion, there is a verse in their good book, whatever religion it is, do unto others as you'd have done unto you. And I've got those quotes from every religion. If we could stick to that, we wouldn't have any wars, but that's just the way human beings are. So I just hope a great number of them come home and get to live that second life.
We need to pray for them.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Any other, here we go.
Good afternoon. So I know that a lot of times when people get drafted, go off to war, they have some family history, friends, uncles, that sort of thing. Was there anyone who was able to give you some advice or guidance about what to do, how to be, to help you make sure you would come home safely?
My dad told me not to volunteer for anything. I volunteered on June the 10th to go to LC East because Echo Company was moving down into the valley that night. They took a bunch of people and they needed one medic. And so I said, I said, I'll go. They had been getting probed by the NVA. And so I walked over there, talked with people, talked with some of the officers on that hill, and I'd never been there before. I was just kind of filling in while the Echo Company was down below. At 2:34 in the morning on June the 11th, that night and into the next morning, the sappers came up that hill. In 20 minutes, they killed 17 men and wounded 34. My father gave me good advice, and I didn't take it. But I was glad that I was there because I was the only medic again in that area to take care of him. I actually, because I did my job, I was awakened or awoke. I have an English teacher for a wife. I was awakened at about 2:34 in the morning. I ran all the way down to the hill where they had hit a bunker with an RPG, rocket propelled grenade. And from then on, they marched the mortars up the hill. So by doing my job, I really saved my own life. I never got a scratch on me in that particular situation, but it was one of the most horrible scenes that I've ever seen. They brought flamethrowers up too, and some of the men were unrecognizable. So I had to go through the dog tags on the boots and that kind of thing. The next morning, I was very busy. Good advice on not taken, I guess. By the way, my grandpa was in World War I. My dad was in World War II. My Uncle Wayne was in the Korean War, and my Uncle Jack was a Coast Guard. So I didn't volunteer to go in service, but I didn't run when they drafted me right out of college, right after I got my degree. Got a question over here?
Did your dad know all of your story? Did you share all of this with him?
My dad and my Uncle Jack, who also was quite influential, were the only two that knew about this battle. Until I went to get some help after I retired from teaching and coaching, things started flooding back. And I was advised to go see a guy in the VA. And I asked the lady why, and she said, well, he's just real interesting. He was a paraplegic Marine counselor, and he was able to walk me through everything I needed to walk through. And by the way, I had a master's degree at that time in counseling and personnel, but there are times when you can't counsel yourself. Please, if you're distraught, if you think you're not loved, go see someone. Have a good friend, have a best friend that you can tell anything to, and be a best friend that someone can come to you. We're all God's children. I always say that my children are God's children. I was just lucky enough to be their dad. That's the truth. Did I answer your question? Thanks.
Sir, you mentioned your dad's advice not to volunteer. I'm curious about you being a medic. Was that something that you knew you wanted to do and you volunteered for, or did the Army say, McCloughan, you're a combat medic?
Well, that's a good question. I always like it flying my way because I was a draftee, and draftees don't get those jobs, okay? I was the only one from 250 in my basic training unit to go to Fort Sam, Houston to become a combat medic. I've never had this verified, but I know why. Studying to be a coach, I took kinesiology, physiology, anatomy, first aid, advanced first aid, strapping, and taping. I think they thought they had and they were shoving us through there to get us to Vietnam. Yeah, they were losing them as fast as they could send them there. That, I believe, is why I went. And again, God has a plan for each one of us. Sometimes we don't know until it happens. And you say, wow, why did that happen, Well, we don't need to know the why. We just need to know that he has a plan for our life. And I hope that everybody understands that, because that helps you through the bad times when you think, why am I going through this? Well, I can guarantee you God's not trying to put the bad stuff on you, but he's trying to see how strong you are, see if you can get through that.
Last question. After all these years, you get a phone call that you're going to be a Medal of Honor recipient. What did that feel like?
Oh. Well, first of all, you don't believe it. I'm going to tell you the short version of this. In 1969, after the battle, my platoon lieutenant called me in to talk to him. He said, Doc, I put you up for the Distinguished Service Cross for your actions in Tam Kee, the Battle of Nguyen Hill. But my superior officer told me that you're nothing but a PFC and they don't get that. Put him in for the Bronze Star. I looked at that lieutenant and I said, sir, I'm not here for any medals or ribbons on my chest or uniform. I want to get home, be a teacher, a coach, and a dad. 40 years later, 2009, that lieutenant went back after the Distinguished Service Cross. It took him 6 years and 4 months to get it from the Human Relations Committee into the Army Board of Decorations and Awards, which is where it really has to be to start. Then they start the process of investigation. A year later, 2016, he calls me. Have you heard anything, Doc? I said, no, I haven't heard anything. Been a year since he had gotten it into the Army Board of Decorations. I said, I'll call Debbie Stabenow. She had taken the case over. And I called her office, and the lady said, I'll call you right back. So she called me back. She said, it's up to Pentagon. And I said, well, do you know how long that'll take? She said, there's a new guy up there, and he said it'd take a while. I said, let me tell you what a while is. You don't know what a while is. At that time, it had been 47 years since the action and been 7 years into the process. Then Debbie called me with the call that you heard in October the 5th, 1 o'clock in the afternoon in the IHOP. Yes, you do remember where you were when you get those kinds of calls. And told me that the case had got on the desk of Ashton Carter to sign for the Distinguished Service Cross, and he read, you need 2 eyewitness letters, and Lieutenant had gotten 9 eyewitness letters. And so she had to write a bill to be passed in the House and the Senate, because you must get that within 5 years of the action. Some tell me 2 years, but she said 5 and it passed December 2016. Heard nothing for another 5 months until Trump called us to tell us that was going to happen. By the way, I figured out who that superior officer is, and he wasn't there for the fight. He came in after the fight, and I know where he lives, and I have his telephone number, and I'm going to call him someday and thank him for discriminating against me in 1969. Because he discriminated against me, 9 guys got to tell the real story, and I'm not wearing the Distinguished Service Cross. 89 men wear the Medal of Honor, and they deserve it. That the last question? Can I be excused? The principal wants me in the office.